Welcome back. In this video, I'm going over the common question, can I deduct my phone costs in my business? What about for your employees or your workers or contractors? Can you provide a phone for them? Can you or should you be reimbursing your workers if you require them to use their phone for your business? I'll be covering all these questions and more in this video. And we'll be breaking down the accounting and tax implications. And there's been some changes in the tax rules that make it much easier for you to get your qualified phone write-off. And so if you want to max out that write-off, be sure to stay tuned for this video. But first, if you're new here, my name's Amanda. You're watching The Business Finance Coach, where I simplify all the technicalities of business and the finances and the money to help you succeed, because I truly believe the world needs your business. So if that sounds like something you'd like to have in your life, consider subscribing to support me. Now let's jump into, can I deduct my cell phone for taxes? Is it a write-off? And what about providing a cell phone to my workers or employees? First of all, let's talk about two costs that are associated with a cell phone so that you have the background from a tax and accounting perspective. So first of all, your phone is an asset because it's something that's used in the business to make money. So a phone facilitates, the operations of your business, unless you sell your phones, right? If you're Target, if you sell phones, a phone company, then they're going to be treated differently. An asset category is all about intention. So with a phone, as long as the intention is facilitating the business, you're using it in order to make money in your business, it's considered an asset because it's something that would generally last more than a year, and assets are treated differently for this exact purpose. An asset tends to be depreciated over time. That's the general rule. Granted, with assets that cost less than $2,500, there are special rules that we get to write them off as smaller businesses. But that's the general concept for an asset, which a phone is. So that's the initial cost of the device. The second part of the cost of a phone is, of course, the ongoing monthly plan. And that's just a regular expense that whoever owns the phone and pays for the service is incurring. And when it comes to business use, if that's a business expense, then it's just a deductible regular expense of running your business. Costs incurred to earn income. So those are the two costs that are associated with your cell phone. Next, number two, let's talk about the two category changes by the IRS that have made things much easier for you as a business owner to ultimately deduct phone costs, whether you're reimbursing employees, providing them with a phone, or using your own phone for business. Number one is that the phone, as far as the asset deduction, when you purchase it, it was part of a category called listed property of assets. And that category is about assets that have recreational use, like pleasurable use to them. Things like phones, laptops. And so there are specific rules under listed property that make the record keeping more strict and more involved. As far as like when it comes to business calls, a record would be required to literally track the nature of the calls, who you're talking to, and much detail about how these calls are business related. So one of the major changes was to remove phones from the listed property category of asset. The second change is that the IRS has categorized personal use of an employer-provided company phone, has moved that to the de minimis fringe benefit. So in the past, if the employer reimburses you for an expense, or if you are using company business property and you had personal use, you would need to track that, and then the company would need to put that into your income on your W-2 so that you would pay taxes on it. Now, all of that is ridiculously cumbersome. I think we can all agree. And so, as part of these changes having taken place, the IRS has loosened regulation around this. So now let's talk about number 3, employer provided cell phone. So like I just explained, in the past, if you provided a cell phone to your employees and they used it for personal purposes at all, you would have to have a program set up by which they report this personal use to you, and then you compensate them, include in their pay that they got this benefit. So now that that's no longer the case, companies are able to provide a company phone for employees and ignore that personal use as a de minimis fringe benefit. However, to qualify, we have some specific criteria. So when you provide a company phone to workers to use for business, in order for it to qualify for their personal use to not be accounted for, it must be provided for what's called primarily non-compensatory business purposes. And what that means is just that you have to have a legitimate business reason for why they need that phone. And it can't be because you want to, make the position more attractive. You want it to be convenient for them. All of those things are considered pay. And you would need to include in their W-2 wages the amount spent on the phone and the phone service, because it actually is essentially their pay. So to qualify as this primarily non-compensatory business purposes would be a few examples. 1, if you as the employer need to be able to contact your workers on their off time for emergencies, that's part of their job description, that they're able to be available for those types of emergencies and that they need to answer their phone. Number 2, if you as the employer or the customers in the business need to be able to contact the workers during off hours. Or if you or the customers need to be able to contact your workers during regular business hours, but due to the nature of the job, the workers are not in one location. And so they need to have a cell phone that they can answer. So as long as one of those scenarios is met, as long as that requirement is met, then any personal use that the worker has on that phone doesn't need to be accounted for. It's a de minimis fringe benefit. Now, if you're providing a phone in this manner, you want to be sure to document that the phone policy meets that criteria, and very specifically how. But once you do that, no more tracking is required of the business and personal usage. That doesn't mean that you don't need to keep records. You should still keep records and keep any documentation. As I always say, keep all the paperwork. Keep it all. So even if you have statements of monthly phone plans, be sure to keep it all so that you have it if it's ever needed. So alternatively, number 4, we're going to talk about reimbursing your workers for using their own phones. And sometimes this is called a bring your own device policy, BYOD. And this means that you are just making a monthly payment to your workers for the use of their cell phone, for them using their cell phone. And just as we just went over with a company provided cell phone, in this scenario, if the workers meet that same criteria that we call the primarily non-compensatory business purposes, as long as that criteria is met, then they don't need to be concerned about personal usage and having to reimburse you for giving them a reimbursement if they had any personal usage. The one caveat in this situation is that your reimbursements can't be more than what they actually spent, which is an interesting, caveat because that might be a little difficult to know, but there are reasonable estimates out there. $30 to $50 a month is the average cost of cell phone service, and you can do some basic Googling to find those numbers and document whatever number your company decides to use, or ask someone like an accountant to help you, come up with that number for your situation. And one other thing to note here is that actually under state law for California, if you are requiring workers to use their devices, use their phones, you're actually required to compensate them as well. California was the only state I saw, going over this as far as the labor laws, but it's something to look into for your state as well to see if your state has any specifics. When it comes to federal labor laws, there are no requirements in this area, even if you require someone to use their phone. Lastly, we're at number 5. What if you're a business owner? Then what happens? How do I get to write off my phone? So as always, when it comes to taxes, it's going to depend, first of all, on what type of business you have. But let's just start with the general rule when it comes to business owners having personal assets and then taking a business deduction. So personal use is never allowed as a deduction for business owners. However, if you have an asset that is owned personally, then you can take a business deduction by tracking your usage of that asset and allocating a portion to the business, and then you get to take a deduction for that. How would you do that? Well, with a phone, you would print out all of your phone calls, label the business calls, label what the purpose was, and calculate the total time of business compared to the total time of personal, and then allocate that percentage of your phone bill to the business expense. Now, when it comes to the accounting and tax world, this is actually what they are still recommending for business owners to do. And quite frankly, I don't agree with that. I think that this rule change very much applies to business owners as well. Certainly, if you are taxed as a C Corp or an S Corp, then as an owner, you're required to be paid as an employee. And therefore, the policies and the 2 options we previously discussed apply to you just the same. As an owner employee, you're no different than any other employee. And so therefore, the only people we have left is self-employed, partnerships, which could include LLCs as well. And so even in those scenarios, I am willing to say that as long as you document that you are actually having a substantial business purpose for having the phone, and you document that, you make sure that, number 2, your reimbursements don't exceed the total cost you're actually paying, and you're not trying to, manipulate the system. You're genuinely trying to just pay a regular, reasonable cost of a phone bill and the phone service, then I believe that that is fully deductible under these changes. So with you as a business owner, if you have a personal phone and you're self-employed, then you don't need to worry about that because you're self-employed. The business isn't separate. So you can just take that deduction because it's business related. When you get into a separate business like an LLC, partnership, then if you have a personal cell phone, you should reimburse yourself for the costs. Alternatively, the business could purchase the cell phone and pay the service as well from the business. And then you wouldn't have to include that in income. It would just be a deduction. So this might not be the most popular view out there. Like I said, a lot of professionals and a lot of the tax literature is still recommending that people estimate a percentage of their phone usage. And that's certainly something you should do if you don't meet the criteria that we've discussed a few times about having a real business reason for needing your phone. However, most people do have that reason. If you use your phone in your business and you have a local business where you take phone calls, then you're going to meet that criteria. And I think it's very reasonable for you to not be estimating a percentage that's used for business, since estimates really have nothing to do with taxes. In general, taxes need to be documented and the actual numbers are always used. So that's how I apply these changes for employee and worker phones to business owners as well. That's all. Thanks for watching. Do let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. I give away a free business spreadsheet template to help you get started with your accounting and taxes. It has a basic worksheet for organizing your accounting, calculating quarterly taxes, and taking those accounting numbers and putting them into the tax totals at the end of the year. You can get that absolutely free. Just click on the link next to the spreadsheet picture or check out the description below this video. I also have other courses and programs to help people with their accounting and taxes, personal finance, all of the money related aspects. And you can find out more about those in the description below this video too. Otherwise, if you're new here, consider subscribing or checking out some of my other videos that are around. And please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it to let YouTube know, and share it with anyone who you think might need it. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye.